Los Angeles, I'm and most Hollywood nights. She goes to California, oh, California.
What you say about Los Angeles?
LA got the people saying,
You're listening to Corner of the Galaxy on cornerofthegalaxy.com. Welcome to Corner of the Galaxy, the show that talks 100% LA Galaxy soccer. We're glad you could join us. Now it's time to sit back and relax as your hosts navigate through the twisting, turning, but never boring world of the five-time MLS Cup champion, LA Galaxy.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Corner of the Galaxy on cornerofthegalaxy.com. I'm your host, Josh Guesman, coming to you on a Thursday, September 12th. The LA Galaxy getting ready for El Trafico. That's right, the final one of the regular season. Could these two teams meet in the playoffs? A lot will be decided coming up on Saturday. A lot to get to surrounding this game. It feels like we've been talking about it for 2 weeks, because we have been talking about it for 2 weeks. Galaxy finally get back on the pitch on Saturday night, and then the schedule picks up, so we're going to talk a little bit about that as well. To help me do all that, we're glad to have him back in the house. It's Eric, the Portuguese Hammer Vieira. Eric, how you doing, bud?
I'm doing great. It's El Trafico week.
Woo-hoo.
We're back. We are so back, baby. It feels good. Feels good to be back.
Does it feel like it's been like a long time? Like it feels like the Galaxy haven't played in like a month or something like that. Is that fair?
It feels like the St. Louis game was an illusion. Like that didn't really happen. I feel like, we had the Royce debut, that everything went well on that game.
Right.
And then after that, it didn't go well, but I feel like we blocked that out, and then you had the international break. So, that St. Louis game, you just forget about it. It feels like a bad dream, and now we get to move on. Now we pick up. Now business picks up. We were talking about there's, a midweek game, so now we're going to have 3 games in a week. So it's all the fun begins. This is the home stretch.
And
this is where the magic happens.
And then there's another break, and then it's like go real fast and then stop, and then go real fast and then stop. It's like we're doing wind sprints out there right now.
Yeah.
So, but no, it feels like it's a long time. Greg Vanney had his press conference today. We'll give you some of the highlights of stuff we learned from Greg. Riqui Puig talked to the press for today, so that was fun and exciting as well. So Riqui Puig there, Greg Vanney there, everybody talking ahead of El Trafico. I'm going to say something because this has certainly been one of the undercurrents that has been taking place on the Discord, but this feels one. Let's state the facts here. One is this is probably the highest, sort of, I don't know, the biggest El Trafico. It's not, because it's not like postseason, but in the regular season, there has never been a higher stakes El Trafico. You have 2 teams. You have LAFC in second place. You have the LA Galaxy in first place in the Western Conference. I don't think that has ever happened, whether it was the Galaxy at second or whatever, but you have that. You have what we will argue, or at least I will argue, could ultimately decide the Western Conference on Saturday night.
Yeah.
And certainly puts that in there. You have all these things. And that being said, it feels like this one's flying under the radar a little bit.
Correct. I was watching Taylor Twellman do his preview of this weekend's slate of games, and he was talking about the Hell is Real derby with Cincinnati and Columbus happening this weekend. And it felt like he mentioned El Trafico in the middle of his things, and then it was in passing, and then he moved through. So from that regard, I hear what you're saying, where it feels like this El Trafico isn't being built up enough. And I'm just going to be my broken record where I say this is the Bizarro season. When the stakes weren't this high,
right,
it seemed like, El Trafico, best rivalry in MLS. These games are all bangers. They're always goal fests. Every time an El Trafico happened, people were, foaming at the mouth for an El Trafico. And this one, there's real stakes. There's real consequences in terms of, seeding and playoff clinching scenarios are in play, and home field advantage with 2 rivalry teams in the mix. And it just feels like, there's another El Trafico this weekend. It doesn't have that same energy that maybe it's had before, but maybe that's a good thing. Maybe that's what the Galaxy want. We're going to talk about how high pressure the situation is.
Right.
And if you turn it up to 11 and 12, maybe that's where you start playing erratically and you don't play your game that got you here. So maybe it's a good thing that it's flying under the radar a little bit.
I will say I was at a birthday party. Jake is now old enough that I have to go to birthday parties on a regular basis, right?
Congrats.
I mean, how old do they have to get before you can just drop them off and go do like fun, like parent
about
stuff?
8 or 9. About 8 or 9. And they also get to an age where, at least my kids, like, you don't do the big party. Like, you invite the one or two really close friends, and you just that's it. That's the best. That's the best scenario to be in.
Okay.
Once you get to that age, you're gold.
Okay, good. Glad to sidetrack. Super hot over the weekend. Went to a parent's house, and this was, for the first time, Eric, as you were just pointing out, this was a kid who was like, the parents were like, nah, we're only inviting like the cool parents that we like. Yeah. And so we did that. And then it ended up being like a really good group of people. You're like, oh man, this is awesome. This is great party, the whole deal. So we did that. But one of the guy who was hosting the party, he's from Germany. And I walked up and I go, so Marco Reus at the Galaxy. He's like, oh, I'm so excited. Like he goes, I'm all pumped up. And he's not necessarily a diehard guy, but he's a soccer. He's from Germany. He's a soccer fan,
German.
right? Yeah, he knows, right? The whole deal. Yeah. He goes, in Germany, he goes, you don't have to be a Borussia Dortmund fan to love Marco Reus. Everybody loves Marco Reus, and it was fun to sort of see that. And I go, what do you think? He goes, I have to go see him play. And I'm like, oh well. I know some people, right?
I know
the
a
whole
guy.
day, yeah, the whole day. So we started talking about it. He's like, no way. He may even be listening tonight. Hi, Dirk. How's it going?
Dirk. What a German name too. On top of it,
he's the
perfect.
He's the best guy. Anyway, so we were talking about just the whole thing, and he goes, "Oh, I wanted to go this weekend, but the ticket prices are really." I go, "Yeah, don't." I'm like, quite honestly, don't go this weekend. Like, if you're just trying to get,
and El Trafico for a casual first time might be a bit much.
Yeah, and he's gone before the whole deal, but he was also saying he's been to some LAFC games and stuff like that, and he goes, for me, he goes, I just like going to the Galaxy games so much better, and I'm like, I understand that, the whole deal, but I was sort of thinking that I go, in the past there would have been a lot more hype in the El Trafico that like that conversation wouldn't have been off to the side. It might have been like a little bit more like up front whenever we saw each other and we're like, hey, El Trafico's coming up, the whole deal. I don't think that diminishes from this rivalry. I do think this is MLS's fault, and we've sort of been beat over the head with it season after season of 3 and 4 games playing LAFC, and it's just like, this has to stop, which is probably going to stop next year, but this has to stop. There's too many games. It feels like they've already played 6 times this year, and this is only their 3rd time, right?
Yeah. Well, just the fact that it's their 3rd game, and with the unbalanced schedule and only playing a certain number of teams 3 times, of course, that does diminish the rivalry, and that's fair, especially when you throw in the possibility of Open Cup in previous seasons, obviously not this year. Leagues Cup, when they're ranked by region, that's always a possibility where you can run up against each other. So, again, it is diluted in that regard, but I think once they get on the field, this happens. No matter how hyped it is before or not, once they get on the field, the hate is real. Yeah. It's on, and it happens. So we'll be definitely, when we talk about foaming at the mouth and being ready to eat cats and dogs, I think we'll be there on Saturday.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun. Weather's supposed to be nice. Good job, Californians, for surviving the heat wave that blistered. Hopefully, you survived all the fires. I know that there's a lot of fires out there, and so hopefully you're being safe. And I know that there's lots of people who are evacuated, so be safe. And then we had an earthquake today. I didn't feel it. I was driving, so you never feel it when you're driving unless the freeway falls out from underneath you. So all that stuff. So I just feel like everything is sort of leading up to this. The heat wave is over. The earthquake has happened. Now it's time to get down to the temperature is supposed to be wonderful this weekend. It's all setting up for an amazing night. And talking to Greg Vandy today, I think you sort of sense there's some. I mean, we can talk about how these games always feel like there's a postseason feel to them. This is going to be ratcheted up, and I don't care if the place doesn't sell out. I do think it will sell out eventually, but I don't think that they have sold out yet. There's still tickets for sale. I think
that is kind of crazy,
right?
And that does say a lot. Yeah, because this is an automatic sellout even before the season starts. I think the Rose Bowl effect does impact the game because this is something where the Rose Bowl is kind of the big ticket item where you throw it in there. And so in terms of rivalry games, if you are going to spend a lot of money to attend an El Trafico, that may have been where you bring in a more casual fan. And so I think it is surprising just because it's a big rivalry and it has implications that it's not sold out, but that also kind of feeds into what we're saying, that it doesn't have that same fervor that maybe it had in previous seasons.
By the way, Feel the Berm already with the best comments in there. They're eating the cats. They're eating the dogs. Right? This is what's happening. There's earthquakes. There's fires.
There's fires. There's earthquakes. There's people.
Jesus.
Yeah, it's crazy times.
It's crazy.
An earthquake at El Trafico. Now that would be next level.
San Jose would have some quip on Twitter about it, and everybody would be like, "Can you just? The adults
are
talking.
Not about you.
The adults are talking. The adults are talking."
Yeah, as Alex Reese would say, he don't know you like that, little bro. So.
No, that's not how it goes. But no, just I thought it was interesting. Let's get you some injury updates because I think that's going to be important to sort of suss out what everything is going. Amiro Garces fully available as per Greg Vanney. He was training fully. He'll be ready for any role that they put him in there. I think he's going to play a role in this game. I think that he's probably going to be a second half sub in this game. Somebody said, I think they're going to start him. I think that person was out of their mind. I don't think that. I think they're going to keep it pretty similar to what they have been doing in recent games. So that's something. So Amiro Garces coming back. Dejan Jovalic, Panda reported it yesterday. We confirmed again today. Dejan Jovalic is ready for any role that Greg Vanney sees fit for him, which means that he very likely could be starting. And I think that you would probably expect him to be starting.
Yeah. Reading between the lines, that's what that says. Any role is not. It's not he's coming off the bench. It's not limited minutes. It's not return to play. It's any role is basically he's starting. This is with the implications of this game. If he doesn't start, I'd be shocked.
Yeah, Greg said in all fairness to Dejan is that with the international break, they've been like slow rolling his return, right? And they're like, now he's back. Like he was probably ready to play even a little bit bigger role in St. Louis.
Yeah, correct.
But they're just that he got the time that he was supposed to get, and now he's gotten the training and everything in the off week, and so he's ready to go. So Dejan Jovalic is there. Julian Aude. So he's still right now. Greg Vanney basically said, he is training, not fully. He's expecting him to train fully next week, and so he expects he'll be available for Vancouver. He thinks that that's pretty likely. So that's there. So I mean, that sort of gives you the update. Now, also heads up, in case you have been living under a rock, Joseph Paintsel suspended with yellow cards, but also Joseph Paintsel having passport stuff to do and things in Ghana before he can come back.
What a wrinkle that was that you reported on Monday. Yeah. That's not what we needed. Imagine had he not been suspended and this happened.
Yeah, I know, because then everybody would be like, what's going on? The whole deal. But basically, Greg Vanney said today that all of the stuff he was supposed to do was supposed to wrap up today, and so they expect him to be back tomorrow. That doesn't help them for the weekend because he can't play.
Yeah,
that
doesn't
being
make
said,
a difference. Yeah.
He's at least going to be back in the full. I mean, at some point you're like, if you can't get the passport thing figured out, then you're not making it back for Vancouver. Yeah. You're not making it back for Portland. You're not making where are you going to make it back for? That type of thing. So, but he says he's supposed to be back in there. Everybody else, to my knowledge, is pretty much Caceres has been dealing with something, although they're not talking about it a whole bunch. Every once in a while, Greg will sort of mention him. So I don't think we have an update on him fully and understand, but I wouldn't be surprised to see him on the bench. I wouldn't be surprised even if he starts. Like I don't think it's anything major, but we'll see.
I would be surprised if he starts. It feels like Neil and Yoshida is your most consistent pairing, and you're going to see there. And so because Caceres hasn't really been in the mix as much, and also what you're going to ask of him is not going to be a full 90-minute performance. So for that, does he need to be fully fit? No, right. You're going to need him with that, the experience that he brings and the grit that he brings. If you bring him on in the last, 35 minutes, 30 minutes, maybe that's exactly the role he's ready to fill. So again, I'm with you. I wouldn't be shocked if he sees time, but I would be surprised if he starts, but I think we know who our starting center back pair is.
It was interesting. Alex Ruiz put this up in terms of Riqui Puig, and I think we should talk a little bit about Riqui Puig. Riqui Puig has created 0 chances in his last 3 games against LAFC. The Black and Gold has been able to make him a non-factor in the final third. Puig has the talent and team to bounce back this weekend. This is the biggest game of the year for Puig. I'm sure Ricky loves that. Not that I care, by the way.
You think does he read tweets?
Oh yeah, 100%.
I said that with my tongue in my cheek.
Okay, good. Yes, 100%. So, good. It's true, and that's all.
Yes.
That's all that matters, right? On this part is that it's true. Ricky was asked about LAFC. He was asked about the fact that really, that they've shut him down a lot, and what are sort of the solutions to that? Greg Vanney answered that question as well, and in fact, Alex asked Greg Vanney that question and said, what do you need for Ricky? And Greg was like, Ricky has to make better decisions in these games, right? Because they love to put 5 in the back, and Ricky mentioned putting 5 in the back. He goes, it clogs, the back end for us. It clogs the middle because they're able to put pressure on from the outside wings to the in, and He says, that means they have to attack with more players. And when they attack with more players, that, of course, leads you up into counterattacks and, all these other things. And so, in some ways, LAFC is built very purposefully to exploit teams like the LA Galaxy.
Yeah, we've seen this movie in the 4th of July game at the Rose Bowl. They essentially shut down Riqui Puig, and with the mistakes that they made in turnovers, that's where they capitalized and scored their goals. We can talk about the rivalry and how much we dislike LAFC, but one thing they're good at is capitalizing on mistakes that other teams make and making other teams nervous and forcing those mistakes. And that's exactly where they've eaten up the Galaxy earlier this season. And that's something that the Galaxy struggle with, is giving away possession, something that Riqui Puig in particular struggles with. And so going back to this game being of utmost importance in terms of playoff seeding, possible supporters shield, home field advantage, all those things, this is a Riqui Puig game where he needs to put the stamp on this game. We were joking about him reading tweets and reading social media. If you've been following along, my champion of the match all season long, that champion of the season, if you're keeping track, it's heating up. Right now, I have Peck and Puig, neck and neck. Right. They're right there with each other. They have the same number of, title belts this ring. And so Peck's right there. And Riqui Puig should be the most talented, best player on this team. And if Peck is gaining on him, that shows that Puig isn't, taking the games by force like he was last season when the team was struggling. So now he really needs to put the team on his back and be mindful of those mistakes, because I think that's going to make all the difference. Are the Galaxy going to be able to get out of there without making mistakes? Because that's where the Galaxy have shot themselves on the foot. You look at the teams that they've lost to when we look at the standings. They've lost to St. Louis, Austin, and Dallas on the Western Conference, and they're all outside of the playoff race. So if those teams make you pay for your mistakes, imagine what a team, towards the top of the table will make you pay. So that's the one thing that I got to keep out for, is don't make those mistakes. And that's why Riqui Puig is so important, because he's the one who's so susceptible to those mistakes and trying to play that hero ball.
It is. Greg Vanney said something today. Charles Boehm asked a question, and Vanney said, we're sort of, because of the way LAFC plays, we're sort of burdened with possession. And Charles says, are you burdened with possession? Is that something like, he basically said, would you sometimes just like to kick the ball down the field and say, you guys have it, like we'll play the counter, like that type of thing. And Greg said, we never want to do something that, we never want to play away from our strengths. And one of our strengths is that possession. He goes, so we don't want to play away from that. He goes, we just have to be really good in all aspects of that. If you're going to make mistakes, Greg highlighted, of course, like when you give up the ball, how do you recover? He goes, that's the most important thing. Like that is going to be the biggest deal in this game. And in some ways, it kind of has to be a little bit of a chess match, which is you can't be overeager to attack. You can be okay with them allowing you to have the ball. Pick and choose your spots, and don't get suckered into making the bad pass that creates the counter, that creates the problem. For as much as Boanga has been, I would say, more hit and miss. He has 9, I think, penalty kick goals this year. So when you look at the numbers, they're granted,
skewed.
They are, but at the same time, having somebody who can actually bury him is pretty nice, right?
He took the words right out of my mouth. Well, what a player who can finish penalties. So we can make fun of that, but we don't have one of those.
No. Well, Marco Royce. I'm convinced Marco Royce is that guy. Okay, so I'm okay. But no, watching Boy, you have to limit his touches. If you give him too many touches, he will make you pay. There was talk about Olivier Giroud, because the Galaxy haven't seen Giroud yet, right? And Greg Vanney said it's with any world-class player. He goes, he needs, he said it's the number of chances it takes you to score. He goes, whenever you have world-class players, he goes, some players it takes 5 shots on goal for them to get 1 goal. He goes, Olivier Giroud is a guy who has half a chance and he scores a goal, right? He goes, you have to be prepared for that. You have to deny him the service. You have to be ready for that. So everybody has to be working in concert. There are no mistakes here. The Galaxy have to play really, really clean soccer. And it was the thing that sort of, and I'd never connected this. He goes, but if you look, and Greg Vanney said this, if you look at Columbus, if you look at Houston, 2 teams that have recently beat LAFC, they're more or less more of how we play, in possession, creating chances and being able. He goes, so the blueprint is there. He goes, we just have to go out and execute it. And I'm like, he's 100% correct. In fact, it made me feel, I think, better about the LA Galaxy. I want to know if the Galaxy mentally can get over the hurdle to beat LAFC. And I think that's almost more important than the points thing that we can talk about as well. The mental part of this is super important, Eric. And if you can prove that you can move them around, that you can cause them problems, that you can make them sweat, which I think Damian Calhoun mentioned to Greg today, he said, if you look at the first 2 games, he goes, you guys played like one good half in each of them, right? He goes, and Greg Vanny goes, I think that's fair, right? He goes, it wasn't like, oh no, I don't agree with it. He's like, I think that's fair. You can't make those mistakes. But this is the mental hurdle the Galaxy have, is to be able to play cleanly. And if they can play cleanly against LAFC, then there's probably no team in Major League Soccer that they can't play cleanly against, which then leads you back to, are they MLS Cup contenders, and everything else. Go ahead. Sorry, I was monopolizing the microphone there.
But you all fair things, and I think my point of bringing up the fact that they lost against teams that are struggling in the table actually makes the point that when they play teams who are closer to the top of the league, they play to their level. We saw how they played against Miami. You saw that when they play tough competition, they're capable of playing good soccer. And so I'll push back just slightly on the mental hurdle aspect. I think they've shown that they can play with this LAFC team. In those halves, they were right there. They it was silly mistakes that gave LAFC the game. You can call that sour grapes or whatever you want, but it's not like LAFC went out there and dominated these Galaxy teams in these 2 games. They finished their chances that they were given, and that was that. And so to your point about this being a different Galaxy team, I think with the Zlatan LA Galaxy and what we saw, a shootout suited them better because, at that point it wasn't beautiful soccer. It was who's going to bring the biggest cannons, and let's go out there and just 4-3, 3-2, and just go out there and whoever's going to win it. And that may favor a team that's not as skillful. But when you have a team that could possess with Riqui Puig, with what he does, and with the danger that they bring on the wings with Peck and with Fagundes, who's going to be most likely filling in that role, maybe you can be a little bit more methodical and beat them in a different way. I think that is where the Galaxy win, is not in the shootout style that we've seen in previous El Traficos, where they win is in a boring, style of possessing and in frustrating LAFC, which is something that they haven't done in many of the times that they've gone up against them.
Well, I think the other part about this is, if you're trying to compare Columbus and Houston, is that both of those teams have coaches who I think are master motivators, who get their guys up. I mean, Ben Olsen, you can say whatever you want about Ben Olsen, whether he lacks tactical acumen and however, he's sort of more of that American style of coach, He
gets teams to perform.
He gets
you
them
to
to
give
play.
him something.
He gets them to play. And so some of that is going to be in this. There has to be an urgency. We want, and I think everybody's sort of looking at the Galaxy, they want to play more controlled. And I think they have to be cautious of being overly emotional about this game. These games are always going to be amped up, but I especially this team, because whenever they get emotional, and usually it's a negative emotion, right? When the Galaxy get negative emotion, they start losing games, right? And you're like, they're not coming back. You could see it in the St. Louis game. Started getting emotional. You're like, nope, this isn't it. You could tell they're frustrated. They're not playing well. And I think that's what LAFC has been able to do. Listen, LAFC 3-game winning streak against the LA Galaxy, right? And in every single game, they doubled up the LA Galaxy, right? Whether that's 4-2, 2-1, 2-1, that type of thing, right? They've been able to double them up. So you have to be able to keep them off the board. You have to be able to score first. You have to be able to control at home. Riqui Puig talking about how important it is to keep the undefeated streak at home, right? It is. He goes, we want everybody thinking, oh man, we have to come in and play the LA Galaxy. I'm paraphrasing, but you guys can go watch these things. I'm usually pretty close whenever I pay really close attention whenever they're talking, because I know I'm going to have to talk about this thing.
Yeah, and the videos are available, but the Galaxy also puts out the Cliffs Notes if you want to go see just the meat and potatoes, which is in the quote that you're talking about Dignity Health Sports Park being the fortress and being what it is. It's true of any team you want to be good at in your home stadium. But when you take in, it sounds like a silly thing, when you take in the geography of Major League Soccer, I think being on a coast is really beneficial if you're able to have home field advantage. Say that what you will, but I think if Cincinnati needs to travel, if Columbus needs to travel, if Miami needs to travel in this direction, it'd be worse for the Galaxy. Obviously, we've seen what happens when they go cross country, but I think there is an advantage, especially when you're in the location of Los Angeles, in terms of geographically how much that means to the other teams if you're able to lock that down.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that there is a real advantage. Let's go this way. Because there's a couple things we actually have to talk about. One is MLS put out if the playoffs started now. Let's sink ourselves into this for a second.
What a time to be alive. This is what I live for.
Just embrace this for what it is, all right? Now, LA Galaxy fans, you might be confused by what you're seeing here. This is called the playoffs. And the LA Galaxy are down at the bottom because they're the number 1 seed in the Western Conference right now.
What's that all about?
A position that they can attain, Eric, and I think we can talk a little bit about that. But if the playoffs started right now, the LA Galaxy would be the 1, LAFC would be 2. You'd have RSL as 3, you have Colorado as 4, Seattle as 5, Vancouver is 6, Houston is 7, and your wild card game would be number 8 in Portland and number 9 in Minnesota. Let's remind everybody how that works. Top 9 make it to the playoffs. 1 through 7 get automatically into that best of 3 series already in, and then you have a wild card play-in game basically between 8 and 9. So in this scenario, Minnesota would be traveling to Portland to play Portland, and then the winner of that particular game would go and face the LA Galaxy. It's not the easiest of spots to be in the 1 seed, already having the other team played a playoff game and sort of already been amped up in that, but you also aren't playing as many minutes and as many games, so there's sort of a balance in this. Yes.
And that's where I think the best of 3 plays more into the favor when this particular scenario, because with them playing midweek and then coming there, that's meant to be a disadvantage. But you're right. Sometimes you're able to work out kinks, and there's the rust situation with a number 1 seed who hasn't played, and you're worried about that. But over the course of where you do have to win 2 out of those 3 games, those minutes are going to start to add up when you have to play 3 games, 4 games, in a week and a half. And so that's where it plays into the advantage to have the number 1 seed. As much as I hate the best of 3 in that first round, and only in the first round, it's the most bizarre thing on the planet. It would play into the Galaxy's advantage to lock down that first spot.
I will say this, that if you're looking at travel-wise, going to Portland is an easier travel than it is going to Minnesota, but you have real grass in Minnesota, but it could be cold in Minnesota, right? So there's like all these things that sort of play in. Minnesota is on the far eastern edge of the Western Conference, right? So it's actually pretty far to travel if you have to go back and forth between that. So that's something to keep in mind. Ultimately it lines up for where you would say, by the way, the 2 and 7 matchup is super interesting because LAFC got beat by Houston in LA and then went to Houston and drew 0-0. Yeah. They were missing six players, I believe, to international duty. We're going to talk about their schedule and how that could affect this game, also the other games as it comes up. But looking at that Houston, a 2-7 matchup would be super interesting in that, because Houston absolutely could play spoiler in that, and it seems LAFC has had difficulty dealing with them. RSL and Vancouver will be at 4 and 5. Colorado, Seattle's a wonderful matchup, especially with Colorado hosting. So you got to play 2 games at altitude. That would be a pretty interesting one. That's a tough one for Seattle to sort of muscle through. That's where you have to look and say, you hope that in a perfect scenario, the LA Galaxy don't end up sort of having to play at Colorado for any of these, which again, it's just why you want to get into home field advantage and not have to worry about this. Somebody said, what would it take for the LA? How many points would it take for the LA Galaxy, Eric, to get into the top 4 playoff spots? And I figured 9 out of the last 18 probably does it, because I think there's already like a 7 or 8 point gap between, that 4th place and where the LA Galaxy are. And so you get 9 more points. So you're probably wrapping that up pretty easy in there. But that to me probably puts you in a 2nd place or possibly even 3rd place with RSL and that type of thing. So it's not perfect where all that stuff is. Is there anything interesting on this besides, as Kevin has pointed out, the only team that the LA Galaxy, if they were to finish 1st in the West and finish 2nd overall in the Supporters Shield, which is kind of where they're trending, and perhaps to win the West, they might have to finish 2nd overall in the Supporters Shield. If they did that, the only team that could host MLS Cup above them would be Messi and Miami. Which is craziness. Was this team in 13th place last year? I just want to. We're talking about things I don't feel like we should be talking. It feels weird and a little strange.
When you see that graphic, it really makes it real, and that's why I was excited in saying what a time to be alive, because I always love when this graphic comes out and all the changes, and when we talk about the charts. The moving chart that MLS puts out on decision day that shows the movement of the standings, and over the last few years, it's been pretty depressing for the LA Galaxy. But now getting to see them kind of rise to the top, it's just an exciting thing. In terms of the playoff picture and what interests me, the Miami of it all, that is interesting to me. Is this team built for longevity? I was not a believer. Obviously, I know that they have the talent with Suarez and with Messi and with Busquets, the whole gang there. But I didn't think they were going to be built for a long MLS season. I thought they were going to get injured or slow down towards the end, and they've seemed to just manage to methodically put teams away and just bury these teams, even without Messi on the field. So Are they going to be able to do it in the playoffs? Is it going to be one of those things where they run up in a 3-game series against like a Montreal or Toronto or Charlotte, someone random and weird where you think that's the team that's going to take out, or New York City is there, Charlotte's a little further out. But again, a New York Red Bulls against Miami, I would not be shocked if they took them down in one of those later rounds. So it's just, is this team going to be able to get it done in a one-off match with MLS? You never know what could happen. So that's, to me, the interesting thing, even it's on the other side of the LA Galaxy. In terms of the Western Conference, we're going to talk about El Trafico. To me, that's what it's going to come down to in the playoffs. When are LAFC and the LA Galaxy going to meet? And so if they're able to keep their standing in that, they're, the top two,
and
it's building towards that. Yeah, it's building towards that.
And then whoever's hosting that has the best chance at winning that. Yeah. Also, I would like to point out, because you just said Miami, you think maybe they could get picked off by somebody, right? And the whole deal. I agree with you. I'll tell you who else is ripe for being picked off and being at the top of a conference is the LA Galaxy.
Yeah.
Because despite the fact that I think they've been super consistent, we were lucky enough to have Kobe Jones on the show on Monday night. The legend himself was on, and I said, are the LA Galaxy?
That's a good get.
It wasn't bad at all. We were glad to have him. But I sort of said, and I figured I knew what his answer was. Are the Galaxy contenders or pretenders? He goes, they're first in the Western Conference. Of course they're contenders, the whole deal. And I'm sitting there going, yeah, but I can see them getting knocked out in the first round. Like there's not a stumbling block in here that I don't look at the LA Galaxy and say, listen, I think they're a super talented team. I think that they can beat any team in Major League Soccer on a given day. I also think they can probably lose to anybody in Major League Soccer on a given day, right?
Yeah, and that goes back to your thing on the emotion. We've seen this team hit tilt, and when it goes wrong, it goes spectacularly wrong. Talking to a guy who's been to plenty of games away at FC Dallas, when it goes wrong, it goes very wrong. And so, as home field advantage is important, but would we be shocked if Seattle came to town and made it difficult for them? If Colorado upset them, we've seen that happen in the past.
Yep.
How many times has Vancouver come in where they were sitting towards the bottom of the Western Conference and they cleaned our clock at home? So it's just one of those things. I'm with you. I understand, and it goes back to our eye testing that we always like to say. Right. We said it last year. The Galaxy are in 13th place. This doesn't look like a 13th place team.
Correct.
They've got to be better than that. We're talking about the Galaxy at the top of the West, and we're like, but they are flawed. I can't see them losing in a first round and getting upset and seeing those things happen. And that's just being realistic also. And it goes back to the mistakes. The Galaxy will be the dictators of how well they do. Another team, I don't think another team will come in and flat out beat the Galaxy. The Galaxy are capable of beating themselves, which is how they've lost these games. But I don't think, pound for pound, head to head, another team is going to come in here and just beat up the Galaxy. I don't see that happening.
That being said, the Galaxy have lost 6 games this year. There haven't been a lot of losses, right? You can. I used to say you could count them on one hand. You're into the second hand now, and that's okay too, because there's only a few games left here whenever you do it. One of the things that we are watching and that we did talk about a little bit before, whenever they were getting ready to play St. Louis, but now with the break and everything going on, are the clinching scenarios for the LA Galaxy. This does not clinch them a specific spot, just clinches them a spot, quote unquote, in the playoffs, which basically means you're going to be in like the top 9.
Hard to do.
Yeah, right? I mean, from where they are, they should be looking at this. So the LA Galaxy with 15 points, 15, 6, and 7 is their record. The LA Galaxy clinching scenarios work like this. There are 7 of them, all right? I will tell you that 6 of them include an LA Galaxy win, all right? So if you want to know how to get the LA Galaxy into the playoffs, beat LAFC, right? And then that goes a long way to getting you into one of these scenarios ends up happening. So we'll give you some of these. Let's go to the first 6, which all include the LA Galaxy winning. So the Galaxy beating LAFC and Austin FC loss or draw at Toronto. Or LA Galaxy win, LAFC and Minnesota United FC loss draw at St. Louis City. Or LA Galaxy win. Yeah, I know. Or
I was going to say, we're going to play the game with you.
Yeah. Or LA Galaxy win versus LAFC and Vancouver Whitecaps FC loss and draw versus San Jose Earthquakes. Or LA Galaxy win versus LAFC and Seattle Sounders loss draw versus Sporting Kansas City. Or LA Galaxy win versus LAFC and Real Salt Lake draw Houston. That's fun. A draw. Houston just has they draw with Real Salt Lake, which is a possibility at Houston Dynamo, right? Or the LA Galaxy win And Portland Timbers draw at Colorado Rapids, also something that could very much happen. Finally, you get into the 7th one, which is the LA Galaxy draw versus LAFC, and Austin lose at Toronto. So those are your scenarios. Those are your clinching scenarios for the LA Galaxy. There's a lot of them, but as they said in Major League, just gonna have to win the whole effing thing, right? It's like that's where this is headed.
And the amount of ors, and why we're emphasizing that, ors are great.
Yeah.
You don't want ands.
No,
you don't want ands. You want lots of ors. So again, and most of those scenarios were win. So win and end situation. To me, I always try to temper myself. Don't get too excited. I know it's in El Trafico. I know we love these rivalry games, but try to be the voice of reason. Calm down. It's going to be okay. But to beat the rivals at home, stay in first place, go 7 points clear.
That's what we have to talk about next.
And clinch a playoff spot. That would just be euphoric. So I'm gonna try to temper myself. But man, all those things just sounds way too enticing and tasty. It makes me excited.
Before we get to talking about points and why this ends up being very significant, Max, $5 super chat. We'll be listening to the pod later. As per usual, wanted to ask a question. Saturday will be my first in real life El Trafico. Any tips or things to know? I will say this. Enjoy yourself. Have fun.
Correct.
Stay within the LA Galaxy sections. Stay away from the other LAFC sections. You see something go down, turn around, walk the other direction. Nobody needs to get arrested. Nobody needs to get hurt. Nobody needs to go to the ER. None of this stuff. At the end of the day, I'm going to sound like a dad here. This is a game. It's a soccer game. Everybody should go out and have fun. This is one of those things, but it is absolutely one of the most intense games that you're going to watch. And by the way, the emotions, that ratchets up the emotions so much higher. It is, as you pointed out, euphoria, whenever things go right, and absolute despair when things go wrong. There is no in between, right? A draw even would be like, oh, people would be angry.
Yeah, everyone would be upset, and that means it was a good scenario if everyone's upset.
Yeah.
My advice, I'm with you. Consider the source. You're basically looking at two old dads here.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Where my thing is, I'd say something a parent would say: be safe. Again, it's going to be a fun time. It's not as chaotic as I think as maybe some people make it out to be. Right. It is what you want it to be. And so I think if you're more on the ultra side of things and you look for trouble, you'll find trouble in those situations. If you go wanting to have a fun time, and there's even people from the opposing team who are going there wanting to have a fun time and the banter back and forth, that exists at these games also. It's not all everyone, throwing things at each other constantly. It's there. So read the room, read the situation, realize where you are. I'm with you. Try to, stay where there's a lot of LA Galaxy, fans being there. And I think obviously the numbers will be in our favor, but just read the scenarios, know where you are. And depending on the type, I guess my advice is whatever scenario you're looking for, you're going to be able to find it. So figure out where that is and then stick to that lane wherever it is. Again, looking at us, we're not the guys who are going to be wearing the bandanas and covering our face and going into enemy territories with the flares. We maybe have a different perspective, but everyone, I would say, even if that is your thing, be safe, be smart about it more than anything.
I sit in an ivory tower in press boxes for these games, right? I'm certainly not going to tell you. The other thing is that be there early, right? It's about
that's a no-brainer. Yes, we forgot that part. That's the most obvious.
Reduce the stress. Show up early, right? It's like one of those. Is like it's going to be a lot of people. There's going to be a lot of things going on. So reduce the stress and go in early. Let's talk about the LA Galaxy and the points, because this is important. I told you what I asked Greg Vanny about and how we do math and everything else. The LA Galaxy sit at 52 points. LAFC sits at 48 points. There's a 4-point gap between those two teams. Should the LA Galaxy win, that makes it 7 points. LAFC have 2 games in hand. We take 2 times 3, which is the maximum amount of points you can get from the games in hand, and that makes it 6. So right? 100%. I know. Aren't you a math teacher right now?
Yeah.
Oh God, that's disgusting.
Yeah, this is perfect.
I hate it.
2 times 3 is 6. Yeah.
Okay.
7 is greater than 6. We're comparing numbers, bring in decimals, and I'm going to explode here. I'm just going to, too much excitement here.
Too much excitement. So you look at all this and you say, okay, that math checks out then. If the LA Galaxy win, and this is why it was important, I asked Greg Vanny, is it important to control your destiny? Stupid question. Of course it is. Just talk about it. That's all I want you to say, right? Is it important to control your destinies? Greg says, with a draw, maybe we could pull it off too. He goes, but it's a lot harder. He goes, a win puts us basically in a position where we control our own destiny. That means that for every game that LAFC have in hand, you pay no attention to, you don't have to worry about it, right? You're just watching. Then you just have to match them on any game day that you have. But on those days where they have the games in hand, you're looking for them to drop points. Any drop in points gives you a chance to possibly extend your lead. And so as this continues down, as things go forward, you can sit there and say, you are talking about an actual title race. It's very much EPL, which is like you're comparing the two teams. What did they do this weekend? How did it go? And as long as you stay even with them, even if it's opposite sometimes, you win, they lose, you win, you pop back up, you get into these different places. At the end of the day, they can't pass you if you match them after you win on Saturday. And that is huge because everybody was talking about games in hand, myself included, where you're like, LAFC looks likely to make these games in hand count, and they're playing better than the Galaxy. They were playing better than the Galaxy. Their points per game has now slipped underneath where the LA Galaxy's is by only like a tenth of a point, no, a hundredth of a point. But it doesn't matter. That is the case right now. So the LA Galaxy technically still holding that points per game edge over it. So this is where the West is won. This is where MLS Cup is won, quite honestly.
Yeah.
For me. Go ahead.
Yeah, when we talk about Western Conference rivals, now we're getting into the territory we've been talking about it from the other perspective in previous seasons where the Galaxy are chasing, and these Western Conference games aren't 3-point games, they're 6-point games because we're gaining an advantage of 3 points and then robbing 3 points from the other one. So they're really almost worth double, especially when you get to this point in the season. So I caught a little bit of flack when I said this after the St. Louis loss. I said, I'm not too torn up about this because I felt like it was always going to come down to the LAFC game because whoever wins this game, it's essentially going to be that 6-point swing. Yes, even if LAFC had more games in hand, if you beat them in this one, it creates a bigger separation and it makes it difficult. Yeah, it's possible that LAFC can go undefeated and then the Galaxy are going to be out of luck. But, you have to kind of figure out where it's going to be. So I think had they won the St. Louis game, obviously they'd be in a much better situation. You can pull some of the pressure back from some of this El Trafico. But do you want that? You want to see the Galaxy in an environment where there's high stakes, where there's pressure. Are they going to be able to perform? And so they've put themselves in a little mini playoff situation right now in September in order to get themselves ready for, the real playoffs when they come down the line. So I'm kind of excited about it because that St. Louis game, it wasn't going to, not that it wasn't going to matter, but it matters less if you're able to win this game.
This is such a crazy, just the idea then translates into the playoffs, right? So you go into the playoffs now, and if the LA Galaxy are that number one seed, which we just showed you how that works, then all of a sudden everybody has to come through you in order to do it. Even the best of three to start with would be, whoever's coming in and playing 2 games at Dignity Health Sports Park if needed, right? So those things can continue to add up, and whenever they add up, that's how it stacks up. But then it becomes even more important because and Sophie and I were talking about this last Thursday, which was the idea that the LA Galaxy and, Sophie I think said, maybe they're a little weak on the road. And my argument is they're just really strong at home. They have one of the best home records in the Western Conference. I think they do have the best home record in the Western Conference. They have 10 wins at home. Being able to win at home is a strength. And as Greg Vanny says, let's play to our strengths. This is the LA Galaxy's strength. You won as many home games as you can get. That's what you need to happen. This is how you win an MLS Cup from a position where maybe you're not the best team in the league, and you can find your way into an MLS Cup by putting yourself in a position to win now, which is, and by the way, this goes for any tournament. You're going to hear me preach this. How many home games do you get? I'll tell you how good you're going to do in the tournament. Like usually if the teams that go on the road 1 or 2 times can win a tournament. You do any more than 2 times, you're not winning a tournament. You're not going to win on the road every single time. That doesn't happen. So, and the playoffs are a tournament. So the more you can stay at home, the more you can be at Dignity Health Sports Park, the more you can sleep in your own bed, the more you can limit travel. All those things work in your favor. That is the way. This is the way. This is the way to the LA Galaxy's MLS Cup. You want to know how it's possible, have a Western Conference final against LAFC at home, right? Imagine that you go out and LAFC has beaten the LA Galaxy 2 times. The Galaxy win on Saturday, which gives them a win in the regular season, and now they meet in the playoffs at Dignity Health Sports Park in a Western Conference final, and the LA Galaxy beat them in the playoffs because that game is at home. It's a lot different if that Western Conference final is at BMO. It's a ton different. It's a massive difference, and you've got to make that count. That's why I go with this as a must-win game. If you want to win MLS Cup, which is everybody's goal, and now you're within reach, you have to win this game.
It's amazing that we got you to move from a mathematical must-win to the psychological must-win.
This feels like a mathematical must-win, though. Like, if you lose this game, what happens? If you lose this game, what happens? And to me, it means that the Galaxy are much more vulnerable for the rest of the season, right? Even if they're somehow able to turn it around and, you need the mental edge over LAFC in this game to prove that you can beat them again in the playoffs.
Yeah, is this a safe space? No one's listening, right? It's just us, two guys talking.
Us. Yeah.
That's why part of me almost, obviously I want to win. You want to have home field advantage, but then that creates even more stress in that Western Conference final. Imagine you make it that far. I'm not even going to say it. You make it that far and then something goes wrong in that Western Conference final. Geez, the stakes are even that much higher because of what it means there. So it almost, I almost have a little bit of a comfort going away and being the underdog and having that chip on your shoulder. There's something to that that I would feel a lot more at ease from a fan perspective. But again, these, when it comes to the home players, there's something about knowing the field, knowing the grounds, knowing the lockers. Those are all those little things that you have that comfort with your everyday game experience where you've gone through that 17 plus times at home. And so you're going to be much more comfortable, even if you are sleeping in your own bed and going just down the road. It's a different game day situation. So from a player perspective, I understand you want to have the home game. From a fan perspective, it does make me nervous because it ramps up the pressure for a possible Western Conference final that much more.
Yeah, I mean, I think at this point, though, you have to want the pressure, right? I mean, that's
correct.
That's you're sort of like, hey,
it's what you want.
I would rather I have pressure on me at home than pressure on me on the road, right? And the underdog is it's so much. I always used to, and this. Hey, let's do our favorite thing where we compare ourselves to professional athletes. I always felt this way. Always. By the way, if you want any super chats, you want any questions for us, now is the time to get in. Hit those up. We'll be happy to answer questions. But I always have felt this way. Is like you'd be playing in some pickup game and one of your guys would get red carded or something like that. And you're like, the easiest thing in the world is to play down a man because the other team is like
forward.
Yeah. You're like, we just have to work hard. Now there's no option. You're just working hard for the next however many minutes. There is no, I always think, by the way, I think that's the case really in Major League Soccer a lot of the times too, is if you are up a man, it's very difficult. You have to know when to put the gas on, when not to put the gas on, especially if you're behind at that point. How do you score? Not a lot of things change when it's just one man, but what does change is the team that's down now knows what kind of effort they have to give for the rest of the game. And sometimes you try to have a balance of like, okay, I want to give 100% effort on this play, and now I can back off a little bit and recover. 100% effort and now back off. Well, whenever you're down a man, you don't have to worry about it. It's all 100% the rest of the game, and you just know. And it turns something off in your brain where you don't have to think about the effort part anymore. You know it's just going to be 100%. And so there's something like that in the underdog part of this too. It's like, man, politics aside, you can look at some people and look at them and they say, I'm the underdog. And it's like, well, maybe you're not. Like the LA Galaxy might even go in there and Greg Vanney might be screaming at them and say, you guys are underdogs. I don't care if it says first on there. Nobody expected you to be here. Everybody tells you all the flaws. Listen to these morons on this podcast, right? They're telling you have all these flaws. You guys are the underdogs.
What do you think Riqui Puig is doing? There's a reason why he's talking that trash and talking his smack on Twitter and online and getting into it, is because whether it's true or not is irrelevant. It's how he pumps himself up. He wants to go out there and dunk on someone online. And what better way to do that than to go into an El Trafico, score a goal, nab an assist, get 3 points, put yourself in a great situation, and then he can get online and quote tweet, Alex Ruiz and say, who has created zero chances now. I think Riqui Puig would love to do that. So whether it's true or not, I think it's irrelevant. We've seen it so many times with the Last Dance documentary with Michael Jordan, where they were telling the story about, the player who slighted him, and then they went to go find out. It's like, well, did this player even say that? It's like, maybe not. Maybe Michael Jordan just made the whole thing up because he needed to do that to fire himself up. So I think that there is something to that. But with the rivalry game, I don't think you need anyone to fire you up because the fans are going to be,
Right.
ready to go. You've played this team and they've beaten you twice this season. I don't know how much extra motivation you need in this situation because it's all right there. It's right there in front of you. You don't need anything extra.
You almost need to rein it in a little, right? Because we talk about
Correct.
being overly emotional, right? So that's always hard. Let's see. Jeff, $2 super chat. Eric, favorite movie or show about math education?
Ooh, this is okay. I have a cheat answer, and then I can answer the question.
Okay,
for real.
please.
So the cheat answer is Ted Lasso.
Okay.
Because of the positivity and the coach, like the leadership aspects.
That's like an
that connected
education
with me.
movie. You're saying
the
education.
positive.
Okay.
I think that's to me. There's so many parallels that you can do with education. Now, in terms of what's it actually,
Yeah,
like
right.
an actual movie about a school setting and in a school. There's a show on HBO called Summer Heights High. I don't know if you're familiar with
am
it,
not.
but it's an older show. It's an Australian TV show, but it's one guy who plays multiple characters. He plays the teacher, he plays the students, he plays all the different people. But the things he does, I don't know if he was in education or did something in a previous life, but he, like the way the students act and the way that some of the teachers, how they look at themselves, it's a comedy, and it's meant to be like docuseries
Right.
satire, almost like the British style Office.
Right.
But it's like, man, someone was around a school and was around kids who pushed buttons, and it's
Okay.
like he nailed the impressions there. So a little sleeper pick for Summer Heights High there.
Not that Jeff asked, but I'm going to go with I don't know. Does this count? Imitation Game, because the way that they're using math to try to like break the Enigma
Okay.
machine and like that to me, like it just makes it makes my brain hurt. But like how smart people are, and like there's levels of like smartness, and for the most part in the world you're gonna find people that are a little bit smarter than you. You're gonna find people who aren't as smart as you, but like it doesn't really matter. Like everybody sort of fits into this. Every once in a while you get in a room with somebody who you're like, I am not even the same species of this person, right? Like it's very much talking to professional athletes and understanding what they're able to do versus you. You're like, oh no, this is like, I'm talking to Zlatan Ibrahimovic. I'm talking to David Beckham. Our lives do not, there is no comparison here for our lives. There is nothing here that we have that is shared. That is a different planet, different thing. But Imitation Game was sort of mine. That was mine. So.
These people are literally built different. And so if Summer Heights High was too deep of a cut,
Right.
if Abbott Elementary, same thing.
Okay.
Whoever's writing on that show, someone's been around a school. They've been like, the jokes are too specific for people in the field for you not to enjoy it and not to get it.
By the way, executive producer Herb, $24 super chat. Thank you, Herb. Always appreciate you. He says, hey, Josh, hey, Hammer, as a pilot, I believe he's talking to me. As a pilot, did you watch the movie Flight with Denzel? If so, how'd you like it? Lots of airplane terminology in there. Watched it for the first time and enjoyed it. John Goodman steals the show with a cameo. I will say...
Topical, Herb. Again, we appreciate you.
Yeah, always.
Flight. What was that? 2014?
Yeah.
How far back are we going?
It wasn't. I mean, it wasn't too far. The whole idea that Denzel Washington one was like a drug and substance addicted pilot, and then somehow saved the plane is probably more accurate than people would really like to understand. The whole inverted airplane, like turning it over, a little stretchy there. The whole deal. I thought the terminology was pretty good, and the part that always gets me is they're about to crash, and like the plane has just come upside down. They're rolling level, and now they're going to try to land it in this field. No spoilers, but the flight attendant is up there because she's helping control the throttles and do stuff because there was this massive failure on the airplane. And he says, "What's your child's name?" And I forget what she says. And she and it's like Kevin. Why not? We'll use Panda. And so she's like Kevin. He goes, "Say I love you, Kevin." Right? And she goes, "I love you, Kevin." And that was for the flight recorder. And a lot of times before things really go bad, you will sometimes hear on flight recorders people saying, "I love you this" or "I love you that," and it's caught. So that way the families know. Just before things really go bad. So that's where we're at.
Yeah, and again, I think all of the things that we were talking about are the realism and the authenticity. That's what sticks with you. I think a thing that I heard, I mean, we're way off the rails,
right?
But
yes.
someone was mentioning how great John Oliver is and the deep dives that he goes into, and people say John Oliver is great until he talks about a topic that you know about, and you go, wait a minute.
Yeah, it's
and
not
I think
all
that's
there.
probably it. And it's probably with Flight and with movies about education, where everyone's like, "Oh, this is so good," and then you see someone who's in the field and you're like, they missed this, they missed that. So whenever movies are able to transcend that, or shows are able to transcend transcend that. People in the field love it. That's how you know you got a good one.
One of my let's see, if you're looking for like what I consider most realistic airplane crashes, the one with Castaway with Tom Hanks, whenever that plane crash still gives me nightmares. Like I'm like, ooh, that's a scary one. And then of course you have to go back to what's the Twilight Zone.
Okay. I was going to say Lost. Do you remember Lost? The pilot of Lost?
Lost was pretty good.
That was a crazy one. Yeah.
That was crazy, right? But for me, I always liked the Twilight Zone and maybe the redo version, not the old version, but they did one with John Lithgow in it, and it was a little more modern. But there's somebody on the wing, and it's just always you're on an airplane. It's at night. You're looking out at the wing. You're like, is there somebody out there? You know, it's like one of those. So that's where we go. Tim has an actual on topic question here. Tim said, $2 super chat. Hi guys, who's going to be Saturday's hero? Thanks. Let's talk about the game a little bit.
Oh yeah, that's right.
That's right. We have a game.
Trafico.
Yeah, let's talk about it a little bit. LA Galaxy hosting LAFC. El Trafico coming up at 7:30 p.m. on Saturday, September 14th. Weather looks amazing, guys. Like it's so much better than what all the heat and everything that we just survived, and it's just we're there. Like fall is here. That means the weather's getting colder, which means playoff soccer is coming. Everything is coming about for this game. You can feel it sort of starting to fit in there. So LA Galaxy, LAFC, 15-6-7 for the LA Galaxy, 14-6-6 for LAFC. Galaxy currently in first place in the Western Conference. LAFC currently in the second place. We've talked about it. LAFC on a 3-game winning streak. That shouldn't surprise anybody. The other thing is that if LAFC wins this game, it would be the first time I believe they would be up in this rivalry. Because right now it is tied. 9 wins for the LA Galaxy, 9 wins for LAFC, 5 draws overall. This could be that pendulum swing. Another thing that you don't want to happen, right?
This is something that stood out to me before. I didn't realize this until I, was previewing the game and looking at it. Yeah, 9 wins for the Galaxy, 5 draws, and then 9 wins for LAFC. If this game didn't need any more stakes on top of it, whoever wins is going to take, the all-time series lead, wherever you want to call it. And the fact that LAFC hasn't had the bragging rights have always been on the LA Galaxy side of it, where regardless of their form on the table, they were always the team that came out on top. So to lose that footing would be, kind of a bad look, especially at home. So this is where the pressure and everything that around it gets wrapped up even more because they're tied and everything.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. By the way, chat's still going on about airplane movies, and I'm getting distracted. I just want to say that the whole deal. Let's see. I'm looking at the what about the plane crash in La Bamba? Hey, that one's still traumatized.
Yes, I saw a Richie shout out in there. And then I do want to shout out, even though it wasn't a super chat. Michael, I think he said he was the first time watching it live, and he said the chat makes it so much better.
It does.
So again, for the audio listeners, maybe these tangents do seem a little wild, and maybe it's not the best thing. But once you're in the chat and you're seeing how it works, it does make it a little bit better, and it makes you understand maybe why we do the tangents that we do. But back to El Trafico.
Back to El Trafico. No, putting this in there. Yeah, LAFC is coming off the 0-0 draw with Houston in Houston. Again, they had 6 internationals that were away. Those internationals now back. LAFC going to the 2-man up top, which they hadn't done a whole bunch of in this. So sort of not surprising. Yeah, and I don't think you're going to see it. Bouanga, I believe, played all of 90 minutes and then maybe played in some other game, and so now coming back is going to you would hope would be a little tired. I think that their 6 internationals are going to make them a little more tired than you would expect them to be. I think that gives the LA Galaxy an advantage. The workload for LAFC, let's bring up their schedule here, because you had the Houston game there. Then they're going to play the LA Galaxy. Then midweek, like the LA Galaxy, they're going to be they're going to be hosting Austin. I know which Texas it is. Austin.
It's all the same.
Then they have to fly to Dallas. Then they have their U.S. Open Cup game at BMO. Then they're going to travel to Cincinnati. Again, 3 days later after their Open Cup game, they go and play Cincinnati. Tough match.
Yeah.
And that is circle that one.
Also. Yep.
Yeah, circle that one as one that they could falter on. St. Louis comes to LAFC after that, right? So we're sort of matching up the schedules. Here's the thing. In general, LAFC has an easier schedule just by strength of schedule and the players they're doing. However, the complication is that they have 3 more games that they're going to play in the same amount of time the Galaxy won't, right? So they have 3 extra games. 2 of those will count. One of them is U.S. Open Cup game, so it won't count as the game in hand. So when you look at that, it complicates their last part. So, I think that does less sort of with where the LA Galaxy are looking, but they didn't have a week off last week. The LA Galaxy did. the Galaxy didn't have 6 internationals go away. They only had 1, and he's suspended for this game anyway. So it doesn't matter, right?
It doesn't matter, irregardless, as Aaron would say. So that's where that fits in. Again, I don't think we'll see, in terms of the lineup, Kai Kamara and Giroud up top. I think you'll see more of the front three. And the one thing that I'll argue against is, while they are going to be more tired, they didn't have the break. The internationals were not on that Houston game, so they'll be tired maybe for a different reason. And we're not catching them at the end of this trip. We're catching them at the beginning. So if they're going to throw it all out there for a game and throw caution to the wind, this is the game that LAFC is going to do that. So be cautious of worrying, factoring all that in, because I don't know how much of a factor is it going to be for the one-off game.
Well, I mean, the bottom line, though, is they've already been playing more games than the LA Galaxy, right? So, they've sort of been having to play all these games. They've had the U.S. Open Cup games. They've had the Leagues Cup games.
Even the process of it is draining.
Is draining. So they have had a congested schedule even since then. So I wouldn't expect that their non-week off, they only got 1 week. I wouldn't expect their non-week off with the internationals who already went over and played and now are coming back. I wouldn't expect that that's going to give them any more rest. The Galaxy come into this with more rest and haven't played as congested a schedule to this point. And then down the stretch, the Galaxy have the ability to stretch this and put this in here. I think it was Tim, he asked who could be the hero for the LA Galaxy. So let's focus in on the LA Galaxy. No Joseph Paintsil. So you're going to have some sort of a different lineup in there. I wouldn't be surprised if you see something that with a midfield of Riqui Puig, Marco Reus, and Mark Delgado in there, and Edwin Cerrillo, who is on yellow card watch. There is one LA Galaxy player on yellow card watch. It's Edwin Cerrillo. And then you have Palencia, who is on watch for LAFC.
Palencia, I think you could probably pencil both of those players for getting yellow cards in this game. Palencia is actually, when you talk about the talent that LAFC has on their roster, he's not a name that jumps out there. But I think back to that 4th of July game and when they played them early in the season, he's been a player that who's, love it or hate it, he's shut down LA Galaxy players. So when you come to who's going to be the player who is the hero, I don't know if it's too basic of an answer. It has to be Riqui Puig. Mm-hmm. If the Galaxy are going to win this game, it's going to be on his shoulders. I'd love to have the Hollywood story of Royce coming in and being the starlet who gets his shine in this moment. The shine came off a little bit in that St. Louis match, but maybe there were different factors at play. I like him more in a role coming off the bench. And then we were talking about Gabriel Peck earlier. He's another player who's shown that he's arguably the Galaxy's best player this season. Yep. So if you're going to say you've been the Galaxy's best player, you have to show up in the big moments. And so I don't know that he has an El Trafico moment yet in those first 2 games. He didn't really, set the world on fire. He played well, and you could argue that he maybe played the best, compared to some of the other players in these El Traficos, but he hasn't put his stamp on it. So this is a chance for him. To me, it's between those two, Peck or Puig. Who's going to take it and make their moment against LAFC?
You want some sleeper choices?
Yeah, go for it.
Diego Fagundes. Likely to start on the left-hand side. You have Gabriel Peck on the right. I think the other sleeper is going to be Dejan Jovalic, who could possibly start this, score a couple goals in this game, because as a 9, the Galaxy have been crying for a 9. I'm interested to see how that plays out.
And Dejan Jovalic used to be a sneaky LAFC killer. That kind of, when he was coming off the bench, he was doing things, and maybe, that's fallen off in his last few El Traficos. So maybe he wants to reclaim that title. We'll talk about D ratings, I'm sure, coming up in a little bit. But on my, when you talk about sleeper picks and players, Diego Fagundes anytime goal plus 270. With Joseph Paintsil out, Fagundes is going to play. He's probably going to be in the wing.
Right.
It's showing up in a big moment. I don't know, plus 270. It feels good. It feels like if you want to make some money. Again, I always say I'm not a financial advisor.
Right.
But plus 270, Diego Fagundes, anytime goal, feels tasty.
Something that will make you, I don't know, maybe it'll make you a little nervous. Don't know.
It makes everybody upset, so I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, Edgar over at News Across the Galaxy, the Nag Boys, always does a great referee summary. So your referee is Ted Uncle. AR1 is your favorite, Mr. Corey Rockwell over there.
AR of the year, folks.
AR of the year. Ryan Graves in there as AR2. Your 4th is Victor Rivas. VAR is Kevin Stott. And then they have assistant VAR in there, but nobody really cares about that.
This is a who's who of MLS refs. It really is.
This is an experienced crew. I mean, if they just would have done this in the first matchup between these two at BMO, then maybe the Galaxy would have gotten out of there with a point instead of a loss. But basically, looking at all the stats, Uncle's not a bad choice for the LA Galaxy in terms, and so it's fine. I will tell you this: yes, he allows things to get physical. He usually doesn't produce a lot of red cards, which is good.
Yes.
But at the same time, I feel like he won't let this get out of hand, like we've seen other referees in the physicality department.
You want the best of both worlds. You want a referee that's going to let them play, but you don't want in a rivalry game giving yellows to 6 different players in the first 35 minutes, because then that taints the game. So you want a player who can take a referee who could take control without necessarily having to brandish a bunch of cards. And I think this is very not very often a pro referee podcast, but I think Ted Uncle, when you look at his stats in terms of yellow cards per game and fouls called per game, he lets players play. He doesn't overly call fouls, and he doesn't give too many cards. So maybe that's not a great thing in the long run.
I know.
In terms of, like the Palencia going in and being overly rough with someone like Gabriel Peck or with Riqui Puig. But in terms of a rivalry game, I think that's what you want. You want to have the players go at it a little bit, have it be a little bit more physical. You don't want the referee being what you're talking about after the game. You want it to be about the game, which is unfortunately, I think, why when I talk about a who's who of who they assigned to this game, I think it was all very intentional by the league, because they don't want mistakes and they don't want anything tainting this game like the one at BMO was. The Rose Bowl, we can argue about that one, but that one seemed a little more even than maybe that first game.
Tillman, for me, somebody to watch always on LAFC. Always seems to be in it, always seems to be causing problems for the Galaxy. Atuesta in there as well. You talked about Palencia. I think that's a pretty good call.
Yeah.
I think you're going to see Giroud. I don't think you're going to see as much of Kai Kamara, but don't be surprised to see him in the second half. That's where Garces sort of comes in and plays a role to me, is if the Galaxy do get a lead and you start getting into the position where LAFC are pressing and lobbing a lot of balls into the box, that's whenever Amiro Garces comes in and sort of earns his keep, because I think he's an aerial threat there. So
he gave us a taste of what he can do, and so we want more. Give us more. Garces coming in off the bench and shutting down games. I'd love to see that.
D ratings, go for it.
D ratings, again, avert your eyes. We're doing good. They like the home team and they like the LA Galaxy. The LA Galaxy are 44.3% favorites to win this game. The LAFC at 30.9, and then a 24.9% chance for a draw. So again, whenever you're having, it's pretty close in terms of where the opposition is. Again, 54% for a non-LA Galaxy win. So that may not make you feel good, but when you look at where these teams are in the standings, it's going to be closer than not. But the Galaxy still favorites to win. When you look at Vegas odds, you have the Galaxy. If you look at a few sites right now, it has both teams at positive odds. So if you want LAFC, it's at plus 157. If you want the Galaxy, it's plus 153. So just slight favorites in terms of the Galaxy there in betting odds, but still very, very close. If you're looking for a draw, plus 285. The over-under was surprising to me. There's some places who have it set at 3. I thought with the amount of goals that have there in this game, it'd be at 3.5. But you have the over-under under 3, plus 115, over 3, minus 135. So expect a lot of goals. I think that's what you're going to expect here. And then in terms of, who do you expect to score? Anytime goal scorer, you have Denny Bouanga at plus 130, Dejan Joveljic plus 150. So again, not getting tons of money there, but if you feel like this is the Dejan Joveljic game, maybe throw some ducats on that. But if you want a sleeper pick, Miguel Berry plus 245, Diego Fagundes plus 270. So
I like the
maybe
270.
This is Miguel Berry magic.
Very well could be.
I like Fagundes also at plus 270. That feels like
right.
Could be something.
Yeah, it could be something there. Football Mania, $2 super chat. Hey guys, who are the underdogs in El Trafico? It's the LA Galaxy, right? We already talked about this, right? They're underdogs.
Yeah, that's what we're gonna say publicly.
They're the underdogs. Really interesting. Predictions guaranteed to be wrong. Go for it.
All right, it's guaranteed to be wrong. So I don't know how people are going to feel about this, but I feel like the Galaxy win this. I feel like you see them finally dominate LAFC in one of these games. I think you see a 3-1 win. I think you see it close, but I think you see the Galaxy pull away late to secure with a double goal lead. I say 3-1 win. I'm feeling it. I'm feeling good about this team and this game.
Should we go over the history of Josh picking El Trafico?
That's why I was like, I don't know how people are going to like that. They maybe want us to be wrong.
I don't know. I would say this. I don't know that I've had more of a toss-up in my head maybe all year, but I think all of the LAFC, LA Galaxy games, all of the El Traficos this year have sort of been, sort of the first one where the Galaxy go to LAFC. I thought that the Galaxy would be the better team in that one. they weren't. But by inches.
For
in a lot
moments,
of ways.
but they weren't completely dominated by the other side.
Rose Bowl was less of a good performance for me, and just in sort of all aspects. But there were some great moments in there, and so you're sort of like, okay, you can sort of see it, and you thought that the Rose Bowl crowd would really help, and it didn't. So for me, I sit there and I look at this, and I go, it really is. One is, let's be very honest. If we were betting this game, we wouldn't, right? Like you're like, I'm not betting this game.
You go to the draw plus 245.
No, I think you just park your money. I think you just park your money. You're like, no, let's go look at some of the other games that in MLS that you might be able to predict the outcome of, because this isn't El Trafico. It's crazy, and you're not going to be able to predict it. That being said, I think I'm with you. I think this is a 2-1 win, a 3-1 win for the LA Galaxy. I think that they need to prove to themselves that they can beat LAFC. I talked about the mental block, and that's so important to this that it matters for the rest of the season. Should the LA Galaxy not win this game, I think it does real mental issues with them through the rest of the year. Like, are we good enough? Can we meet them? I love the idea of the LA Galaxy meeting LAFC in the Western Conference Finals, regardless of who has the home game or anything like that. I love the idea if the LA Galaxy win this game. The Galaxy don't win this game, and I feel like they go into the Western Conference Finals as we're not as good as they are. And we can't figure out ways to beat them. You have to figure out ways to beat them. And so I think that's up to Vanny. I think that's up to Vanny to motivate. And then it's up to the players to
show up,
to execute. Because very often when you watch the LA Galaxy not play well, you can see what it is. It's not Greg Vanny making those bad passes out of the back, the whole deal. It's like, you're like, it wasn't, Greg Vanny didn't make Joseph Painsil miss a pass that was only 6 yards away and gave it over to the other guy, and now everybody's out of position and he didn't work back. I know Greg, that's not his system. So the players have to show up, and it's about time. And I think you called it right. Riqui Puig has to step up. This is his game. He wants all the accolades. He wants to be able to talk smack on Twitter. He wants to be able to tell reporters they don't know what they're talking about. Glad to do it. But you better show up and start doing something, because you haven't in the last 3 games against LAFC.
That's what I want to say. I don't know if that's overly simplistic. It's such a fan perspective thing to say, well, the players got to show up. But truly, there have been moments and halves of games this season where it seems like the team was maybe a little checked out, or maybe when they went down a goal, we saw that emotion and that frustration. Sophie likes to highlight that, and I don't think she's wrong in that analysis, that when they get emotional, they can get a little whiny and get a little prima donna-ish. And so we've seen that, and that's not what you want in this particular game, in this particular setting. So as weird and as basic as it sounds to say, the players got to show up. This is the moment. And you're right. That is on Vanny, but it is on the players, because if they make mistakes and they shoot themselves in the foot, people aren't going to be pointing at Vanny and saying squad selection and this and that. We know who our best available squad is at this point in the season. There's not going to be coaching moves that we go, man, why did this happen? We know coaching wise, I think we have a pretty good idea of what's going to happen. So now, to your point, will they execute? Will they be able to avoid mistakes? That's what it's going to come down to, and that is on the players.
I'm going to say starting lineup with McCarthy. Right back is Yamane. You're going to have Yoshida and Neal in there. Then it's going to be Nelson on the left-hand side. In the midfield, we already talked about
John Nelson.
Big John Nelson. This is a big game for John Nelson. Really, you'd like to have Julian Aude in this game just because he gives you another dimension. But you have to rely on John Nelson. You were talking about somebody who has to have a big game. John Nelson has to have a big game. So John Nelson has to have a big game. Midfield, Marco Royce, Riqui Puig, Mark Delgado. Would I be surprised if Marco Royce didn't start? At this point, I think I would. But at the same time, there are options there to be able to not start him and have him possibly change things up in the second half. Maybe that's something that Greg Vanny, maybe that's a twist or a wrinkle that you want to throw in. But as of right now, Brugman available, Cerrillo available. Like, you're going to have all these guys that can come in and do stuff. So,
that'd be my pick. I want Royce coming off the bench. I think Cerrillo, he's shown that he's a gamer and he has that grit, and that's what you want in this game. I think you go Cerrillo. I think you go Puig. I think you go Delgado, and then you save Royce to bring in for when you need it. So that'd be my preferred start in middle and starting 11.
I have zero issue with it. Won't surprise me if it happens, right? So that's something there. As far as up top, I think you're going to go Fagundes. I think you're going to go Jovalic. Greg Vandy's telegraphing it that Joveljic is going to start, or he's really throwing us off, and Miguel Berry is going to start, and Joveljic is going to come off the bench, right? It's one of those. But I think the Galaxy need a 9 regardless, especially with Paintsel out and you don't have the extra sort of wingers.
Has to be.
One of the things you have to watch for, and then Pack on the right-hand side, Diego Fagundes on the left-hand side. That's how I would say it. One of the things you have to watch for is Cuevas, and when Cuevas comes in, whether or not he's going to come in for like Fagundes and be able to take over that spot, but that's a good spot for him to be in. Don't hate it. Really like it.
Yeah, that's when we talk about coaching moves and, getting mad at the coaching moves versus player performance. That move, bringing Cuevas in and more of the winger role, and you see it with what Yamane brings when he is on the field as well. That, to me, is an excellent wrinkle in what the Galaxy can do, bringing Cuevas in and the form that he's been in. He's someone who maybe doesn't get a lot of the love, but what he's been doing off the bench this season has been spectacular.
By the way, people talking about Brugman not doing – listen, I am 100% Gaston Brugman fan. That guy is a player. You put him in these situations, I think he's going to do fine. I don't worry, and I don't think Greg Vanny's worried about Gaston Brugman. I don't think fans should worry about Gaston Brugman. Put him in situations to succeed, however you want to do that, right?
Yeah.
So get him to that place, and Gaston Brugman can be unbelievable for you for the LA Galaxy. People are sleeping on him just because it's taken him a little bit to get back into it. I'm like, just wait. This guy is a gamer, and it's whenever he sees this game against this team, he won't be thinking about getting injured. It's going to be on.
To me, he's reached the Caceres point of his time with the Galaxy. I think Martin Caceres is not someone who I necessarily want starting every single game, but there's a role for him, and he fits that role well. I think Gaston Brugman, for whatever reason, this injury maybe made him into a no-brainer starter, but there is a role for Brugman to be brought in the right situation, and like you said, setting him up for success. I still like him. Maybe he's not a first-choice starter for me anymore, but I still like what he could bring to the team.
That's it, dude. LA Galaxy, LAFC, El Trafico, Saturday, 7:30 p.m. Kickoff, I think it's 7:40 p.m. Everything rocking and rolling. You're ready to go. MLS season pass, all that fun stuff. I will not be there. You guys have known this. I've told you about this well ahead of time. I will be watching on TV. And so we'll see if I have any coverage while I'm watching the game and trying to tweet at the same time with 2 kids in a hotel room. So it should be a lot of fun. But we'll be back whenever the Galaxy hosts Vancouver and should be back for the rest of the games this year, including all the playoff games. And possibly if the LA Galaxy go on the road in an MLS Cup, if it happens, I might be headed to Miami. So, it's one of those. We'll figure it out as we go there. But, that's where we're at. Anything else that you want to add before we get on out of here?
Nothing to add. Let's get 3 points. Let's clinch the playoffs. Let's beat the rivals. Let's just get this out of the way. Let's get it done.
And really set yourself up for the stretch, right? That's the idea. You do this, you get that momentum. Now you're flying high. Everything's good. You clinch a playoff spot. You're now 7 points clear of LAFC. You control your own destiny for the rest of the time. Game on. You have a game midweek against Portland. You then will go home and play Vancouver. This is going to be a tough week, but you start it with an El Trafico. So, you don't have to worry about those other games. It's just about El Trafico to start off. That's right. 100%. All right. Eric, why don't you tell people where they can find you? We'll go.
All right. As always, you can find me on everything at HammerEV9, Twitter, X, Instagram, all the fun things at HammerEV and the number 9.
If you're looking for me on Twitter and X, at Guesman, at Galaxy Podcast, cornerofthegalaxy.com, where you can find all of our wonderful stuff there. YouTube, SoundCloud, Apple iTunes, Spotify, any of those places, you name it, you can find a podcast. You type in Corner of the Galaxy, and you will find us there. LA Galaxy, LAFC, El Trafico number 3, last one of the regular season, possibly previewing what the LA Galaxy and LAFC have stored in the postseason. All right, hope everybody has a wonderful time. Be safe. Enjoy. For Eric, the Portuguese Hammer Vieira, I'm Josh Pato Guesman. You've been listening to our little Corner of the Galaxy. Have a great one, everybody.
You've been listening to the Corner of the Galaxy podcast on cornerofthegalaxy.com. You can follow the show on Twitter and Instagram at Galaxy Podcast. And be sure to check out and subscribe to iTunes, Stitcher, and Facebook by searching for Corner of the Galaxy. Fans, we thank you for listening. We ask that you be kind and courteous to your neighbors as you leave the podcast. We thank you for joining us and look forward to seeing you again. Until then, I'm Michael Araujo, and on behalf of the entire Corner of the Galaxy crew, goodbye.